Welcome, huge movie fanatic Nate stopping on by. This time I'm coming at you to review something that I never thought would happen. Kind of cool and kind of not cool at the same time that it did happen. I guess I'd probably have to, believe it or not, lean a little more towards cool than not cool that this happened. If you guys didn't know, this has just been, I think the trailer just dropped a couple, weeks ago or a month ago or something like that. The first time I ever heard about it was when the trailer dropped not long ago for basically a sequel to the original Christmas Story. If you guys don't know, they had tried at least one of these before. I don't know if there's only been one attempt. I actually reviewed Christmas Story and Christmas Story 2 years ago. I ended up coming across the DVD of Christmas Story 2 for $2 or $3 and got it and reviewed it years ago. I want to say 7 years ago at this point. And I can't even remember what I thought of Christmas Story 2. I think it had Daniel Stern in it or something like that. But flash forward to 2022, and we've got basically more or less a more, I guess, kind of an attempt at an official sequel to Christmas Story. And actually, as much as the title might kind of suck, I actually like it. It's simply called A Christmas Story Christmas, and I actually think that title is kind of daring and actually more cool than not cool as well. So basically, this movie, obviously the big star of the original film from the 80s was Peter Billingsley, more popularly known from the movie, full moon movie by the name of Arcade. He's also known from the movie, lesser known movie, A Christmas Story. And I guess the big draw of this movie basically is the fact that it's Peter Billingsley reprising his role as Ralphie, which is really cool. And honestly, I think it was last year. I generally watch Christmas Story once a year, and last year I watched it and I watched the extras, and Peter Billingsley did. I don't know. I think he narrated the behind the scenes or the retrospective making of or something like that. And it occurred to me, how cool would it be to do a version of the original movie where Peter Billingsley, now as an adult, would actually replace the adult version of him talking, just as kind of an experiment, not an official thing to override the voice of the original movie, because that's just beyond classic. But how cool would it be to have Peter Billingsley go in and replace the adult version of Ralphie talking? That would be really cool. And cut to a year later, they actually do not that, but a kind of the next best thing, which is basically a Christmas Story sequel featuring Peter Billingsley decades later, now in, I want to say, 1973. Oh, for the record, at this point, I kind of hope this doesn't stay this way forever and it does end up coming out on Blu-ray, but chances are it may not. At this point, this is an HBO Max streaming site exclusive, and part of me was, after I saw the trailer, part of me was like, God, should I sign up for like $10 for 1 month just to watch this? That way I can watch Matrix 4 and other things. What the hell, Dune, and there's something else. There's, I think, Barbarians on there as well. I did. They did end up doing a holiday special promotion where for 3 months you can get HBO Max for $2 a month. So I did that, and I plan to most likely cancel after the 3 months. But so yeah, I was delighted to be able to see this for a lot less than $9, $6 if I end up doing all 3 months, which I most likely will. So basically, it takes place in 1973, and what's cool about the movie is that obviously the original Christmas Story focused on the character of Ralphie, and it was more of a movie about, and incidentally the movie came out in the 80s, right when I was around the same age that characters are in the film. So being a child of the 70s and having grown up in the 80s, I mean, the Christmas Story is a movie that I more or less I try to watch once a year. It's one of those movies that has a special place in my heart because I just the decade, the era I grew up in, and it was a new movie when it was out. That makes sense. It was a new movie when I was a kid, I meant to say. And and it basically primarily focusing on the kids. It was really one of those, just a really kind of a special movie to me for that reason. Not the biggest fan of Christmas Story, but every time, this time of year rolls around, I try to watch it at least once. So the idea of a sequel that takes place decades later when he's now an adult and has kids was kind of interesting to me. And for the record, it does feature, unfortunately, the woman who played his mom in the original film, I guess, has long since retired. So unfortunately, it's not the actress who that would have been very, very, very special if it could have been that actress actually reprising the role as his mom. So strike one on this movie for that. It's actually the woman from Airplane, the lanky, skinny love interest from Airplane who plays the mom. Which every time I see that woman in anything, all I think of is just her comedic role in Airplane. I would imagine she's in Airplane 2 as well. So I think with the exception of her, I want to say that, don't quote me, I only saw it once, but I want to say everyone else that's a character from the first film reprises their role, like Flick and Schwartz. And if I'm understanding correctly, the guy who played his little brother reprises his role very briefly. I'm not 100% sure, but I would imagine it's the same actor who played his little brother. Obviously the Darren McGavin or whatever the hell his name is or was obviously isn't in it. I don't know when he departed this mortal hell-plane world, but lucky him for having done that several years ago or decade ago, whenever the hell he left this mortal pit of hell. This movie is cut to 1973, and honestly, Ralphie's wife is kind of fun to look at, and they've got a son and a younger daughter. And Ralphie, what's really cool about this movie is, the first film, of course, we all know Ralphie had this ultimate goal, of getting. He had a couple of things that he wanted to accomplish in the movie. The main one was, of course, his obsession over the BB gun, and the second one was kind of like the Ovaltine story or whatever. So instead of, now he's an adult, he doesn't have the BB gun to obsess over, but it's kind of cool they gave him something else to obsess over in this movie for the entire length of the movie, and ends up, coming to fruition at the end of the movie, which is he wants to be a writer, and he's written this novel, and he sent it around to, all kinds of publishers, and, it's just like, he took a year off to actually write this book and send it off to all kinds of publishers, and that's kind of, instead of having a BB gun wish, or not wish, but, desire for the first film, he's got the, want to get his novel published desire for this film. And I'm not going to ruin what ends up happening. All I'll say is that I think, I got to tell you, if you're my age and you grew up with the original movie, and if you've had your dad pass on as well, there's a couple of parts at the very end of the movie that are really going to tug on your tears and pull on your heartstrings. They really managed to really get you a couple times at the end of the movie with just some of the twists of the story, the story twists and stuff like that. So kudos to them for doing that. When the first one happened, I was like, oh my God, that really tugs at the old heartstrings. And then later on, not long later, like the next morning, something else, or no, it's the same morning, I think, something else happens, and I don't want to ruin it for you guys, but they're just like, oh my God, two tear jerker tug on the old heartstrings scenes. But one thing that I found kind of coarse about this movie is, let's face it, as cool as it would be to have Peter Billingsley voice the adult version of himself telling his childhood story in the first film, let's face it, the guy who voiced the older version of Ralphie from the first film has just a beyond classic voice. And I guess honestly one of my biggest complaints with this movie is the Peter Billingsley narrates this film just like the other guy narrated the first film, and the voice is, I don't know, I think Peter Billingsley, in my opinion, his voice is too overly energetic, and it's a little annoying, him narrating this whole film. Obviously, it only makes sense to have him do so, but it's kind of annoying. I don't know if he's supposed to be telling this story the same at the moment it's happening, or recounting this from him being in the nursing home or something like that. I don't know if the guy who did the original voice for the first film is still with us or not, but it almost would have been cool to have had that guy now having an even older voice do the voice for Peter Billingsley, because I don't know, as I said, I'm not 100% sure if he's recounting this moment to moment in present day 1973, or if he's recounting this from the nursing home in 1983 or 93 or whatever. But that's one of the things, that the most annoying things about this movie is Peter Billingsley's just narration of the movie. I found to be maybe a little over energized and energetic and almost exhausting to a certain degree, but at the same time it was cool to actually have Peter Billingsley do it this time around as well. So the premise of this movie, without getting too much into it, is simply he and his family live in Chicago. He took the last year off, probably starting in January, this whole year of '73, to write this novel and send it around to publishers. And his whole plan is, if he doesn't get it published by the end of the year, he'll start working in '74, and he'll give up on his whole writing thingamabob, or writing, his whole writing goal. So that's the premise of this movie. What ends up happening is, early on in the movie, he gets a call from mom, and unfortunately not played by the same actress from the first movie, as we've discussed, and the bitter news about the dad, Darren McGavin character, having passed on actually in 1973. So for the purposes of this movie, he lived until 1973. So that's the reason they end up going back to the original house from the first film, which I don't know if this is the same house, or if they recreated this, or what. I mean, I would imagine the interior's a soundstage or whatever. But I think they did the same thing. They had the same house in the first Christmas, the Christmas Story 2 that came out, that I reviewed years ago. I think they had the same house in that movie as well. But obviously, having the movie take place, so as a result of the dad dying, obviously they didn't want their mom to, he didn't want his mom to have to, this happened like right before Christmas, of course, so he didn't want it. So he went back to, he didn't want his mom to have to spend Christmas alone, and obviously she had things she had to do and stuff like that. So for the remainder of the movie, the majority of the movie is them. That happens early on in the movie, so they go back to his old childhood house, which is the more or less, for all intents and purposes, the same house from the childhood house from the first film, which is really cool. But like I say, I think we saw it in Christmas Story 2 as well. But this is a little more meaningful because it's Peter Billingsley back in the house and stuff. And so it's just the exploits of what goes on with that. Honestly, having just seen it once, and it just kind of just flew by, just like, oh my God, kind of a mind wipe kind of a situation. I don't need to do a beat by beat anyway, but overall, I want to say the reviewer on Blu-ray.com gave it like 7 or 8 out of 10 stars, which I was just like, before I saw it, and I was just like, holy cow. And I'm not sure it deserves that per se, but it's definitely more good than it is bad. Obviously, the aspect of the presumably digital photography was kind of a bummer. They did a pretty good job. I'm assuming the snow is fake and just spray painted on the cars and just spray painted on the ground and stuff like that. Maybe they got some real snow for the scenes where they drive through the snowman and stuff like that. But obviously, being an actual person who lives in Minnesota, who's lived in Minnesota their whole life, obviously when you have a movie like this that's got most likely freaking fake snow, that's kind of a little bit of a strike to the movie because of that. But I mean, obviously it's not the easiest thing in the world to find snow or film in cold environments and all this and that, but still, it's just a big strike for me, someone who actually comes from the Midwest. Or, well, I didn't come from the Midwest, I'm still here, but honestly, I think they did a pretty good job, and I'm absolutely fine spending the $2 to actually see this. Yeah, what's kind of cool about this movie is there's obviously winks to the first film. The frickin', we've got the Bumpus's frickin' hound dog still around, and his son and daughter have more or less kind of bullies like he did. And what's cool about this movie is, as I said earlier, the first film was focused on Ralphie as a child, so it's more of it's focusing on childhood. It's told through the eyes of a child. This movie is focusing on Ralphie as a parent, as an adult, so it's told through the eyes of Ralphie as an adult. So it's focused on him as an adult, but because he's got 2 kids, you do get a little bit of that, a little bit of stuff through the eyes of kids to a certain extent. Maybe not through the eyes of them, but experiences that his kids are also going through. So that's kind of a best of both worlds situation, a movie that deals with ostensibly more or less exclusively Ralphie as an adult, but also, we get to have some scenes with his kids and what, the plight of his kids and what's going on with his kids and stuff like that. It's the snowball fight, which leads to, the daughter getting a snowball in the eye, and kid ended up, sledding with a broken arm and stuff. There's, I'd say this is a worthy sequel to the first film. Oh, what I was starting to say earlier, it's just a shame that, assuming it's shot digitally, that is the case. Like this movie for me would be just so much better if they could have miraculously had it, if they could have, I don't know, it's just, just coming from the era I am, I'm just so much more, all about frickin' 70s and 80s frickin' film stock and stuff. Like the original film on Blu-ray just looks so beautiful. So to have a movie like this, much like with Christmas Story 2, just look all crisp and digital and stuff is just a little bit of a bummer. One thing before I end the review I don't want to forget to mention, obviously this takes place in 73, which is really cool, and the what's really cool is you can see it in the trailer as well, but when the movie starts it's a Warner Brothers movie, so they use like the 70s era Warner Brothers logo, which was really, really, really cool. What a great idea. And then they do kind of the legendary logo and they make it like green and red letters and stuff. Really, really cool to see them use the original, or the facsimile of the original 70s freaking Warner Brothers logo, because this takes place in 73. And what's fun about this movie is, I was born basically in the mid 70s, so I experienced the first 4 or so years of my life in the 70s. And what's cool about this movie is, as an extra added bonus, because in the 80s when the first film came out, obviously it was a period movie. So now in 2022, when this movie comes out, obviously it's still a period piece in the early 70s. So for people who are into Quentin Tarantino probably loves this movie because it takes place in the 70s. But as an added bonus, it taking place in 73 is kind of fun, and seeing what Ralphie's childhood home looks like. Pretty much all the same, except for there's probably a 60s or maybe 60s era TV in the living room and stuff like that. Obviously, this movie is going to go through a lot of the same kind of things that the first movie did. I wouldn't say it's ridiculously like fan service. I'd say it's a really nice blend of I don't know. It doesn't do a lot of that stuff that you roll your eyes at, like a lot of that overdone fan service stuff that's been in recent movies, like the more recent Halloween movies, or I don't know, other things that I can't think of off the top of my head. But what's really cool is there's several instances where it does the thing. Even as an adult, Ralphie looks up into the sky, smiles, and does the daydream thing. And I think that happens 2 or 3 times. And there's a really fun scene. I can't remember exactly what it is, but it kind of like a western, Fistful of Snowballs or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what the hell. It's a play off an old western title. I don't know what the hell the title is, but they actually make it like one of them wider Panavision movies, just for that kind of the alternating or variable aspect ratio situation. And so there's like 2 or 3 situations where Ralphie looks up and goes into fantasy land and stuff, even as an adult, and have that happen. So as much as some people might say it's just fan service, it's just rehashing what the first film did, I think Christmas Story Christmas, I guess you could kind of call it that, but I think that what it does in the tradition of the first film isn't so much like fan service as much as really just trying to, I guess, emulate what was great, what was so great about the first film, and for the most part, I want to say they pulled it off, and I'm not going to ruin what happens with Ralphie's, more or less the thing he's all worried about, or I guess his adult wish, or what he wants as an adult. I think the way the movie ended was very realistic, and a really nice way to have a happy ending that is more on the realistic side than just having him get everything he wants or whatever. And honestly, the pitfalls and stuff they go throughout the course of the movie, where the funny scene where they bring the kids to the Santa thing. And what's really cool about this movie is obviously the whole Santa scene. In the original, we see it through the eyes of Ralphie. And this movie, once again, it's him bringing his kids to the Santa. It's like part what they're experiencing, but it's mostly about what Ralphie's going through. And since his wife has got a broken ankle at this point, and his mom is mom and getting on in years, they just have some wine, while Ralphie's all running around the store getting the Christmas presents and stuff, and because of a faulty frickin' trunk latch on this old, beater vehicle, the presents end up getting stolen out of the trunk, and that adds another really cool element to the movie, and it's a part that plays off with one of the tearjerker scenes later on towards the end of the movie, which, I defy anyone, especially someone who's lost their father, to watch the end of, watch all this movie and watch the end of it, and not shed some tears at the end of the movie. A couple times it's just like it's like a 1-2 punch. It's just like bam, and then a few moments later bam. And yeah, I think they did a really, really good job with Christmas, with A Christmas Story. Christmas. I wouldn't necessarily say 8 out of 10 stars per se, but I will go as high as 2 3/4 stars out of 4 stars. I've got a different star system, as we can see. The 10-star thing would probably be easier, but I've just been doing my 4-star thing for over a decade, so I'm just gonna stick with my 0 out of 4 stars ratings and my quarters. So 2 3/4 stars out of 4 stars, nearly 3 stars. And the reason why it's like not higher is just because, let's face it, it's digital, most likely fake snow, and the voiceover is just kind of obnoxious at times, and a little overzealous, over energetic, and just a little annoying. You're so used to that soothing voice from the first film, and like I say, in a perfect world they would have got that guy. Chances are he's left this mortal plane as well. Lucky him if so. But I guess that'll pretty much do it for my review of A Christmas Story, Christmas. And I gotta admit, as much as the title on the first time you look at it or hear it might be stupid, I do think it's a really kind of a daring title and a fun title. So honestly, they pretty much jam-packed as much as you could really fit into this movie, and they did a really good job. And throughout the course of the movie, I was obviously they had Flick and Schwartz and possibly the original kid who played his brother, and I was watching the movie. I'm like, God, but what about the bully with the yellow eyes, or whatever the hell color eyes he's got, and he makes an appearance as well. It's really cool how they saved it for later, and it's just really cool what they had, how they had that character. The role they had that character play. So the bully, the older bully from the first film is in this, and there's a little bit part with like the sidekick, shorter bully, as an adult as well, and they do their kind of punch each other on the arm thing, kind of a callback to that scene or whatever. But even when that bully now as an adult shows up, and I think the part that they gave that character, now in 1973, so many decades later, it was just like, wow, that was really well done. And at first when he popped up, I'm like, well, where are they going with this? And then what they ended up doing with it, I thought was really cool. So I guess the more I think about it, the more it almost deserves 3 stars. But I'll just stick to my. It's a very, very strong 2 3/4 stars out of 4 stars. Just barely below 3 stars for A Christmas Story, Christmas. So let's hope, fingers crossed, that this comes out on Blu-ray. It'd be nice to have this on a physical media pile right under my Blu-ray of A Christmas Story. But chances are it may not, which would be a really, really big bummer. That's one of the things that, as convenient as streaming is, that's also one of the things that really sucks about streaming. So with any luck, this will end up coming out on Blu-ray. But I guess if it doesn't, we've got the best of the 2 films on Blu-ray anyway, the original film. So not necessarily sure I'd watch this every year, because I've got so many. Let's face it, the real Christmas movies that matter are the Christmas horror films and stuff. So it's hard enough to get all those in, especially this year with the last 3 Silent Night, Deadly Nights making their way to Blu-ray. So all the 5 of the Silent Night, Deadly Night films will be on Blu-ray this year and every Christmas season moving forward. So it'd just be nice if this came out on Blu-ray, because I think it's too good a movie to just be held captive in the streaming only area forever. So I guess that'll be my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, we'll catch you on the next video.